Hello kiddies, it's your Captain Ween speaking. On today's video I'm going to combine a lot of the techniques that I've learned over the last few weeks. I'll have two video channels, one of my new Hero 8 GoPro which is inside the cabin, and also the Hero 4. I'm obviously doing voiceovers, I'll do audio mixing, fast forward certain sections of the video, include still pics and text overlays. Today's flight is a quick lap around Phillip Island from Bunurong Field in Inverloch. There's currently an oil rigger in Western Port Bay and I was pretty keen to check that out. I'm on runway 36 here at Bunurong Field, so facing towards the north, and just commencing my run-ups, just getting the RPM to about 16 or 1700 RPM, and then I cycle the prop 3 times to make sure that there's oil through the prop governor. Now I'm just checking the magnetos independently of one another, so put the right mag on first and make sure that there's no more than about 150 RPM drop. Back to both and then put the left mag on and again make sure that there's no more than 150 RPM drop and there's no more than about 50 RPM difference between them. Just doing a departure call, which would be something along the lines of Bunurong Field and Inverloch traffic. Romeo Golf Charlie is rolling runway 36 at Bunurong Field and will depart crosswind for a local flight to the west. I start the takeoff roll here initially applying some power and just keeping it nice and straight along the runway. There was a left crosswind, so I was holding in left aileron. And this runway is downhill, so the plane wants to fly pretty quickly as the ground sort of drops away from below you. So as soon as we're airborne, I'm pulling the manifold pressure back to 24 inches and the prop back to 2400 RPM so we don't make too much noise. And as soon as I've established a positive rate of climb and I'm over the power lines at the end of the runway, I'm getting rid of the 2 stages of flap. So you want to do this nice and slowly as the flaps obviously create lift, so you don't want to have a massive drop as you're reducing the flaps. And as soon as they're put away, kick in some left rudder and then left aileron and turn onto a crosswind leg and climb up to about 1500 feet. Just making a small adjustment there to the prop and winding in a bit of back trim to take the pressure off the yoke. Making sure that the manifold pressure is right, and then I start to lean it out pretty much from the get-go because I know that I'm only going to be climbing to 1500 feet. So I lean it out and also close the cow flaps just before the top of the climb. There I am, just closing the cow flaps, and it often takes a fair bit of force just because of the ram air that's coming through the cow. Just approaching the township of Wonthaggi here, and you have to be 1,000 feet over a built-up area. So according to the altimeter, I'm on about 1,300 feet and I climb it up to 1,500 by the time I reach the township. So plenty of margin for error. So I just whipped that bit along, but as we approach the coastline near Wonthaggi, we're coming up on the diesel plant, which caused a lot of kerfuffle at the time that it was built. But architecturally, they've done quite a nice job, and it blends into the landscape. It was a little bit bumpy on this particular flight, but I often try to get out over the water where possible because you don't get the temperature differentials that you do over land, and therefore it can often be a lot smoother flying over the water. Whenever you're flying over the coast or over any tiger country, you always have in the back of your mind what you would do if there was an engine failure. And one of the really important things to always know is what direction the wind's coming from. So I took off to the north on this particular flight, and I'm currently flying towards the west. So in the event of an engine failure, if I turn 90 degrees to the starboard side of the plane there, I'd be basically directly into wind and naturally looking for a field to put it down in. But luckily, the Continental 0470 has been an incredibly reliable platform, and I hope that I never have to encounter that. We're just passing the township of Kilcunda at the moment on the coast, and I'll just fast forward this bit until we get up to the Phillip Island MotoGP track. So the MotoGP track is just off the nose of the plane. I've been there to see both World Superbike and MotoGP, and it's an amazing spectacle if you've never seen it before live. One of the things that really strikes you about the track from the air is the difference in height between the northern end of the track, which is really high, and the southern end of the track, which is really quite low. So I'm just coming up to a part of Phillip Island called Summerland Bay, and this is where the famous fairy penguins are. We took the kids there to see them when they were young, and we didn't see any fairy penguins, so I made a wisecrack about them all being eaten by a fox the night before, and didn't go down too well. I often cut off the very tip of the peninsula here because there is a restricted zone in Western Port Bay, R323A. It was deactive on the day, but I often just make a habit of just cutting the peninsula short regardless. I'll fast forward this next little section until we get to the oil rig that's in Western Port Bay. So off the starboard side of my plane there is the township of Cowes, which is the biggest township on Phillip Island. And then at about my 11 o'clock and coming up to the port side of the plane is the oil rig. So unfortunately the footage didn't look great from the video itself, but I did get some good still photography of it. So as I come around the corner here, I start to think about heading for home. The weather wasn't great on this particular day and there were some thunderstorms forecast for later in the morning. I do a bit of a climb up over the township of San Remo and New Haven, and to do this I bring the prop up to 2400 RPM and the manifold pressure up to 24 inches, just to make sure that I give myself plenty of clearance over those two townships. And then I track back along the coast and do a straight in approach for runway 36. So I hadn't been gone long, probably 30 minutes in all. So I knew what the weather conditions were like back at Bunurong Field, and rather than sort of overfly and then join midfield crosswind, I just did a straight in approach for runway 36. So I might fast forward it at this point and I'll slow it down again at the point that I'm sort of setting up to land. I've just passed the township of Cape Patterson on the starboard side of my plane and trying to judge when to turn onto a very long final for runway 36 at Bunurong Field. So I've already got the manifold pressure back to 20 inches and the prop at 2100 RPM. And shortly I'll bring that back to 15 inches and then start to trim the nose up just to bleed off a bit of speed. I start a turn onto a long final for runway 36 at Bunurong Field with the beautiful Bunurong coast in sight. There is a left crosswind blowing, so I get blown a little bit past the runway and have to work to bring it back onto the runway centre line a bit. Pulling the manifold pressure down to about 12 inches and trimming the nose up just so that I can really wash off some of that speed. So starting to think about when to bring in the flap, still probably a little bit too far away. If you bring it in too early, it just takes a lot longer to get down to the runway. But here we go, stage 1 and stage 2 of flap, which is 20 degrees on the Cessna 180. I must apologise for the footage on the outside camera. It's picked up a fair bit of fog throughout the flight, and the footage is quite ordinary. I'm about to bring in my third stage of flap here and also put the prop into full fine in case of a go around. I do a few little checks on late final, which are just habit, just double checking that the mixture is rich and also that the prop's in full fine. It was pretty gusty down towards the ground on this particular day, and even though I did have the ailerons into wind, I picked up a bit of a gust there, so important not to panic, just let the plane settle. And one thing that I'm yet to master is landing downhill on this strip. The tail wheel tends to touch first, and the mains still feel like they're about 2 feet in the air, but it wasn't too bad of a touchdown, pretty smooth and at the right speed, so just kept it straight down the runway, and another successful mission. I generally start to clean the plane up whilst I'm taxiing back to the hangar, so put the flaps away, and I also like to roll the trim forward as well, just so good habit to be in, so that you know that next time you hop into the aeroplane it's all ready to go. But definitely the trim is something you always need to double check, because they take a heck of a lot of holding the yoke forward if you were to take off with that trim backwards. Just taxiing it with the brakes today on the wet field, they tended to shudder when I spun it at the top of the runway and again here. So I spoke to my lamey after the flight, and he said it's nothing to worry about. It's just generally when the brakes get really wet. So just shutting the plane down now. And thank you very much everybody for watching. I'll put a few still pics up of my flights at Phillip Island. They're not all from today, but from just photos I've gathered over the journey.